Snaptech IT is the expert go-to resource for all things CMMC, education, certification, preparation, and ongoing managed IT. Manage, secure, grow. Check it out at snaptechit.com.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana Mantilia, and I am your host. And here's Carl. Hey Carl, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Dana. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. So we have a interesting topic. I don't think we've covered this at all. Remediation advice. So this is what to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, this is the real one everybody's nervous about, I think, right? It's like, you see lots of talk about getting assessed and lots of talk about I need to find a way to be compliant. But really, this is the nuts and bolts of what it really means is how are you going to plan to get yourself there? And there's lots of ins and outs of it. So look, I could see why lots of people have questions because a lot of time their question about CMMC is what is all this going to cost me? And the reality of it is you typically don't know until you've assessed it and you put together a plan. And that plan, a plan of action and milestones is usually a remediation plan of action and milestones, things that you need to get done that were gaps. So what needs to be fixed or remediated? And so it's something that you need to have as a functional plan to get you to compliance. And then you need a functioning remediation ongoing plan for how you handle things that pop up, vulnerabilities, threat actions, so forth, so on. It's not the same as your incident response plan, but it's just generally your policy and procedure around remediating. How do you go about it?
Okay, well, that ties right into our first question. So what is the purpose of a remediation plan?
Well, it takes on a few different things from a compliance standpoint. Look, some organizations are able to get provisional acceptance to contracts, even if they don't fully meet a compliance requirement, because they can state a plan that shows that they're going to do it within a certain time frame. That provisional approval is a very serious remediation plan in that sense, because then you're submitting your system security plan, your plan of action and milestones, and it's essentially a promise that you're going to do it. And so that could become a problem if you state that and then don't follow through. Mm-hmm. That's where you could have false claim acts, or at least you could have fines that could come through, or you could be, removed from a contract. Who knows what the actual resolution will be, but it won't be pleasant likely if you formally state, I'm going to do this, and then you don't follow through. But, in the highest level sense, whether you're doing compliance or not, this is just a good practice on how to really manage the development and the maturity level of how you handle IT and cybersecurity. And at the highest level, that's what all of the CMMC stuff is about, is the desire to raise the general ability to have cyber defense, the general awareness and the general ability to prevent bad things from happening that will relate to the company, but also our society as a whole. And so this is the core. This is the crux right here, is what are you going to do about it? Where's your plan? And look, if you just start doing things without a plan, you're likely to do it out of order, have higher costs than expected. A good analysis with a good plan for remediation is what you need to do. And so it's both something for you to submit as a promise, but it's also just a great way to manage your IT and your compliance in general.
Okay, so getting into that, so what specifically is included in a remediation plan versus maybe an incident response plan?
Well, so remediation is about saying, look, we've identified, out of the, let's say the NIST 800-171 controls, or which is identical to CMMC level 2 now, in the CMMC version 2. So that's not confusing enough, right? Mm-hmm. There's these 110 controls, and you might get an assessment, go through and say, you know what, we're really not doing 75 of these. We got nothing, and we really need to get into it. And I'm telling, that's not an exaggeration. That's super common. I've seen much worse than that even as we get out there, because a lot of folks are just beginning their journey here, and they've got a lot of bad practices that need to be worked on. And so it's about specifically creating a system security plan, a plan of action and milestones document, where you're going to list out the controls, you're going to list out the projects you're going to do, and generally the timelines you're going to try to get them done by. That's the milestone piece of it, right? And so you're going to say, okay, yeah, we're going to address all the things related to authentication and identity access management. Here's the project we're going to do, and we're going to have it done by X date. and then you need to put the resources and so forth behind actually following your plan. But that's basically lining up all the things you need to do and putting them on a timeline and putting them into a spot where your IT people or your HR people or your governance people now feel like I know exactly what I'm asked to do by what time, and it's just a matter of managing to that plan now.
So the remediation plan is basically, this is what we're not doing, but our plan to get so that we are doing. And then the incident response plan is that, and then when it does happen, something really bad happens, this is how we're going to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, look, the two interplay. Incident response is really specific about who needs to be alerted. Are we calling the attorney? At what point in time do we call insurance? How do we talk to the customer? Who talks to the customer? It's really super tactical on an incident response policy and plan. The remediation is really like, okay, we've identified this gap. Maybe this incident showed us this gap that we have. So now what are the new gaps that we have that we need now to fix? The fix plan is your remediation plan.
Perfect. Perfect way to put it. Okay. So what is vulnerability remediation, and how does this step help you during your CMMC audit?
Okay, so this is a really good question, because something that is very weak in every small business out there, in fact, it's really a dirty secret of IT outsourcing as well, is that except for very large companies that are able to use advanced and fairly expensive software, vulnerability management in particular is an issue. And vulnerabilities are simple things like, hey, I didn't get this patch, and so now I'm vulnerable to the Bluekeep vulnerability, or I'm vulnerable to the Exchange Hafnium attack. These are ones that just happened last year. Therefore, because that patch isn't in place, or maybe there isn't a patch in place, but the vulnerability has been identified, because of that, now I'm at risk and much more likely to get hacked or have my information stolen or my controlled unclassified information accessed. And so these vulnerabilities need to be scanned for. And when you get the list of all the ones that are found, which is typically thousands, you need to then figure out an ongoing management plan for that. And so that's really answering the question of the difference between a plan you might create, say, from an assessment and an ongoing remediation plan. And so it could be like, for instance, from a vulnerability standpoint, you might say, look, our policy is to address critical and high risk vulnerabilities within X amount of time, and medium within X amount of time, and maybe informational ones are considered not reading our risk threshold, so we don't address them at all. Those are really common examples of the way that you might handle a plan for remediating vulnerability. And there's really specific things called out in the CMMC policies and the standards about being able to do vulnerability management and having a plan for how you're going to remediate those and constantly manage that, because they come up every day and there are thousands of them. Because like, if you think about it, like maybe your web browser, Chrome, has like 10 vulnerabilities that just were found on it. And you need to fix it. Well, if you've got 100 machines, you've got that vulnerability 100 times now. And if it was 10 of them found, you've got it 1,000 times. But the one fix is to just get Chrome updated on those 100 machines. As an example, that would be your plan.
Well, that was very good. That was very helpful explanation there. It was. All right. So what level 2 certification under CMMC 2.0 will manufacturers be required to have a remediation plan?
Well, this is kind of like a thing that's changed in 2.0 is, first of all, you're supposed to have a system security plan or SSP and a plan of action milestones in all levels. But there is a real distinction now, because some levels of CMMC implementation will allow you to not only have it, but also use it for provisional grace period, as we discussed before. And some will no longer allow a plan of action to be submitted. You either have it or you don't, and you'll get a finding on the audit. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have those documents and be operating by them, but so everybody should be doing a system security plan document and have a regular plan of action milestones and remediation plan going. But some of the levels will allow you to submit it for provisional approval. My understanding of it, and this is probably something that there might even be greater clarification on it during the current public review period that's happening, is sometimes it's expected that folks at level 2 will be able to use plan of action milestones for provisional approval now, whereas before they maybe not wouldn't. And then there are folks at level 3 will not be able to. They need to have them, but they will not be able to use them for provisional approval. And so there's just some changes that have happened there. And I don't really know how that's going to sort when it's all said and done. In general, I think they made it a little easier than it was in first. But the point is like, this is a practice you should be following regardless of whether you're going to try to use it for provisional approval for a contract or not. Some of the levels are going to be required to have them in place. Well, all the levels want you to have them in place. Some of them, you could even leverage them for provisional access. I guess maybe that's a simpler way of saying it.
You know, I was just thinking, I think that one of the things that might be the gotcha with this is the ongoing monitoring of it, because, you know, we're very check the box people by nature. Like, okay, this plan is done, right? Check the box. But when it's got to be an ongoing thing, you know that it's you know, consistently things are popping up. So, you know, even if you created the plan last month, you still need to keep an eye.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the fundamental thing of this in general, right? You first need to have it documented. That typically means you need a policy. That's what system security plan and plan of action milestone. It's all about writing it down. So you just put the stake in the sand somewhere. Then you need to have the controls that actually execute your policies and the projects going that actually execute your remediation that you've stated you're going to do. And then you need to have it audited or ongoing managed, right? If you don't have all three of those steps always in function in your business, you're not going to get approval from the compliance standpoint, but you're also failing to really do a good job. It's like, I can't tell you how many times in my life I've seen somebody like, hey, we've got a backup. I said, well, have you checked to ever see if it's working? And I'm like, well, no, but I pay somebody to provide backup for me. So, and then so, well, why don't we take a look? Oh, look, it hasn't run for 3 years, or pretty ridiculous stuff, right? But it's amazing that, you know, the value of, you know, one, stating what it is you want to have done by a policy, and then 2, implementing it, and then 3, verifying it's actually implemented or ongoing management or running. And so it's, you got to have all 3 of those things in motion. And so it's not just an assessment, it's not just getting through compliance, but it's about a new behavior, right? So. Yeah,
which ties into our next question, which is other regular businesses. So is a remediation plan just for businesses looking to get CMMC, or does this apply to all businesses that want to shore up their security posture?
Look, another way of referring to this is maybe as an IT roadmap, you know, that, and we've been doing that for customers of all kinds for years, which is basically, look, if you want to do a better job with your IT, if you want to reduce risk, I mean, that's what a lot of this is really coming down to. It's like, look, there's risk in being connected to the internet. There's risk in transacting business across computers. It just is. And it's more risky than ever. And so, you know, you want to have a plan to improve it. If you know that you're not doing a great job, you get your assessment, you know you need to improve it. So create your plan. And this applies to any business universally. In the CMMC world, we want to call them system security plans and plan of action milestones. And we want to make sure the list of questions that are required are answered. You can answer more than that, but you want to, you know, another business may not have to have specifically those 110 controls, but nonetheless, having a plan, going about it methodically with a budget and a multi-year view is just good IT. It's just good systems management. You know? Yeah.
Well said. Well said. All right. So what advice can you offer for businesses that do not have a remediation plan in place, as well as those that have one, but they might need a little sprucing up?
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting question because I think it really has a lot to do with the operational maturity of a company. I could certainly relate to in my business as we started it. You know, initially it was me, myself, and I. And let's say maybe it wasn't as mature as it could have been. You know, we're out there. I was out there helping people with their IT, and then I started to build processes, and I realized, you know, we really need to do a better job in areas, and we just started this practice. And I think more than anything, this is a leadership problem, and it's about discipline to continue and realize it's a journey, not a destination. And what I say by leadership problem is, it's like, look, if you go to your IT team and say, hey, we need to be CMMC compliant, put together a plan, they do it, and you're like, okay, done. And you never follow up, you never ask for that additional ongoing audit piece. If you don't understand fundamentally how to manage, say, your IT team or your IT provider to make sure they're doing these things, then you really haven't done it. So to me, this is more about a culture. And so, if you don't have a remediation plan in place, it's about the leadership team deciding that they want to manage their risk. They do want to become compliant. They do want to reduce their cybersecurity risk, all these things. Then they need to just get the process started. Even if it's as simple as give me 5 things that you need to do, and then maybe turn it into something more formal. It's more of a culture of constant improvement. Change it 1% every day rather than 50% 2 times a year or whatever, that because it's more about the ongoing management, the ongoing discipline to constantly be asking, where am I vulnerable and what do I need to fix and how do I stay on plan? I see plenty of small businesses that struggle with that level of discipline. And so, look, work with an organization that can help you with it, or introduce somebody to an organization to do that. But ultimately, this comes down to how can you start? Well, we start basic. Just make sure you get that meeting scheduled. Just make sure you're regularly asking the questions, and it will begin to improve. And as you go, you will get better and better at it. And so if you have one that's anemic that needs to be strengthened, my guess is it's because you're simply not giving it enough time and attention or enough regularity and discipline. And so it comes down to leadership, and it comes down to discipline of following through.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I also think that, even some of these smaller organizations, that you could assign somebody that could kind of be in charge of making sure they start getting some of these things implemented. And by having somebody that maybe you pay them a little bit extra and they're at additional responsibility, I always call this the BISO, the Business Information Security Officer. So kind of helps with getting some of the compliance things in place. And, again, I'm starting with people that are not really doing much of anything, that's just a good place to kind of.
Yeah, that's a really good point, is who's responsible for it is the number one first question. Like if you just think my IT people should do this or whatever, but you've never specifically stated in a job requirement, you've never held them accountable to it, nobody's specifically responsible. And that is a great way to do is pick out somebody. Look, I've seen a lot of manufacturers, the person they grab isn't even on the IT team. They're somebody that just already handles control systems for them, or they just, in general, that's their role is to be detail oriented, policy driven, and they help hold the other business units, accountable, IT included, ownership included, HR included, because the policies really go wider than just IT anyway. But the point is that having somebody specifically with the responsibility, that's a good winning first step. Great suggestion.
I think it's a good idea. And that person also can probably relate to some of the other employees a little bit better than just the IT people, because sometimes I think there's a bit of a disconnect with that IT person that's very intelligent, but they may not think the same way and process information the same way as some of the other employees.
Well, it's just part about recognizing that although IT needs to be compliant, compliancy management is oftentimes not specifically an IT function.
Yep. Well, this is really, really good. Thank you so much. I'm glad that we touched on remediation, because that's not really something we've done yet so far. So now we have.
Great. Well, that's what we're here to do, is try to introduce topics and give thoughts, and hopefully people find it helpful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Carl, very, very much for your time and expertise.
All right. No problem. Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And we hope to see you on the next episode of 123 CMMC. Bye-bye.
Snaptech IT is the expert go-to resource for all things CMMC. Education, certification, preparation, and ongoing managed IT. Manage, secure, grow. Check it out at snaptechit.com.